Since this is a channel primarily directed at pop music production, it only makes sense that when Taylor Swift drops an album, we listen to that album and we respond with some content. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video today. We're going to be taking a look at how to make a song like Taylor Swift's new album, Midnights, and we're going to primarily be looking at the two songs Maroon and Midnight Rain. However, we're going to be going over a bunch of production techniques and tips that happen throughout the entire album. So if you're really trying to hone in on that Taylor Swift sound, or if you're just looking for cool techniques to use throughout any kind of pop music, this is definitely going to be a video that you want to sit through. If you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate that a ton, and it helps out the channel. But before we hop into Cubase and start diving into this song, my name is Austin. You're watching Make Pop Music, where we have weekly tutorials on music production. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And after the video, if you want to support the channel, you can head over to our website, Make Pop Music, where we have all kinds of samples, presets, courses, all kinds of really, really cool stuff. However, since this is for an artist video, we do want to give you guys a freebie. So if you want to download any of the samples and presets that we've either made specifically for this project or ones that we've pulled out of Make Pop Music products that we're allowed to give away, there will be a free download in the description. So feel free to go download those and you can get access to a bunch of the samples and presets that you're going to be hearing in this video. But now that that's all over with, let's dive into Cubase so we can actually break down how to make a Taylor Swift song like her album, Midnights. Normally when I'm working on a song, I'll start with chords or with some type of synth or keys or guitar, but for this, I think that we should start with drums. So I'm going to pull in some drum samples, lay down a kick and a snare pattern, and then we're going to base the entire song based off of that, because that seems to be kind of a running theme throughout the album, are these super kind of ambient, thumpy, almost like hip-hop inspired drum samples. So we're going to drag some of those in, and then we'll work from there. Here's what we have for the kick and for the snare. I went ahead and laid down a really simple pattern with just the snare on the 3, and then the kick is just kind of doing this like typical Taylor Swift drum pattern. And all we're really doing is for this kick, it's really kind of a quintessential thing that she's done throughout a bunch of her pop albums, is she'll kind of just have a typical kind of subby kick like that. This is the breaks kick from one of our packs. And then she'll almost always have some kind of like stomp or big roomy kind of live kick layered over top of that. And so what I've done is I've just dragged the subby kick to C and this kind of stompy kick to C sharp. And I'm just doing some band passing baked into Groove Agent. If you wanted to do this outside, you definitely could, but basically just band pass that stompy kick and then layer it over. And then together you're going to get this kind of sampled, but still kind of roomy and punchy kick versus this. And that kind of gives that immediate Taylor Swift vibe. And then for the snare, it's actually just a really simple kind of trap snare from one of our packs. I think the Popstar pack. Yeah, I didn't use this one. I kind of went back and forth. So it's just the grande snare turned down 4 semitones. And then what we're doing is we are processing this with some reverb. So we've got some Valhalla Vintage Verb that's just doing kind of a short concert hole. And then we're just making this quite a bit darker because her album in general is pretty dark, almost lo-fi-ish. So I don't want a bunch of that top end. We don't need all that. That feels much better. So now that I have that, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that over. And then I kind of want to go ahead and lay down a bass pattern because especially for the two songs that we're referencing, that tends to be kind of the main element throughout, especially the verses. So let's go ahead and get a bass pad in there, figure out what we're doing for the chord progression, and then we'll pick up from there. All right, so for the bass, we're going to keep this chord progression pretty simple and pretty pop. We just have a F right here, to a C, to a G, to an E, back to an F. So I believe we're in C major. That would put this as a 4, 1, 5, 7. Let's hear that now with the drums. And this is a really simple patch. This is out of our Poptopia preset bank for Serum, but there will be a download in the description, as we said earlier. Basically, it's just a respace, which just means that you are taking some kind of bass sound, and typically I'm going to work with either a sine wave or a square wave, something that's got some pretty solid, consistent low end, and then you're just doing some pretty heavy filtering and some distortion. So it sounds pretty simple. One thing that I do like to use on some of these is I have kickstart. So right here, we've kind of sidechained this to the kick a little bit, so you can see that it'll duck out when that kick hits. That's a technique that I hear in a lot of her stuff and a lot of stuff that Jack Antonoff produces in general. And then we also have this stereo maker right here. What this is doing is it's turning everything below like 167 mono, just so we don't have a bunch of that low end on the sides. I found that her album being so dark and so bass heavy, you really want to make sure that that mono compatibility is kind of staying intact and you don't have all of that bass kind of swapping around speaker to speaker. We're going to get in with having really, really wide stereo elements later, so we don't need the bass to be there right now. Let's go ahead and let's layer over some keys and some pads to kind of give this a little bit more space and ambience, and then we should be kind of rocking with a good verse. For the main kind of padded elements, what we're going to do is we're going to mix a couple different pads. I've noticed that in her album, she's using a lot of kind of ambient textures, and we're going to go in and add some drones and some kind of top melodies and things like that later, but I kind of just want a long evolving pad so I can just kind of hold out notes, and it'll kind of have this spatial movement. So we have this pad Meditate. Here's what it sounds like in solo. It's really angelic, it's really soft, and then what we're doing is we have this filler pad that I just made from scratch. I'm just using a sine wave, and what I've done is I've turned on the portamento, so as I play it, I notice that the album also has a lot of these like really glidey synths, and then what we're doing for playing that is instead of just playing those big kind of sustained chords, we're actually kind of arpeggiating that chord. So we're going like this. And then both of those with that bass and that kick pattern and snare pattern that we have sound a little bit like this. Now I think it's time that we start beefing up some of this drums and percussion. I kind of want a hi-hat, and then I kind of want some like roomier either snaps or like a tonal snare or something in the background. So I'm going to find some stuff for that and then fill you guys in. I went ahead and laid down some hats. What I'm doing for these is, this is a cool technique to make something not sound so generic like trap hats, is I've just dragged in a pretty typical hat into like a sampler in Cubase. But what I've done is I've turned on some RC20, and that's just going to give it some filtering so it kind of like dirties it up a little bit. And then what I'm using is repeater to kind of give me these dotted and 16th note delays that go back and forth. So it kind of has a little bit of stereo spread now and a little bit of extra movement. So here's what it sounds like. And then we also layered over this like kind of hip hop crash. And then I've just got this snap right here with some delay and reverb, just kind of doing a nice big roomy. And then one thing that I hear her use all the time, she's been doing this since 1989, are these like really tonal snares where they kind of have a note in them. And then we're just going to layer that under everything. I'm going to build up the synths a little bit more, and then what we're going to do is we're going to work on filtering some of these elements out for the verse, and then we're going to move on to the chorus. One thing that I definitely did want to add before we kind of get too into this is some kind of like droning synth that's going to have a bunch of movement. For stuff like this, Omnisphere is a great choice because a lot of these presets have a ton happening. So I'm just using ripping foils, and it's kind of doing this like really almost like bowed guitar thing. And we're just going to be tucking that in. And then kind of doing a similar thing, I have another pad that's going to kind of drone on, and this is just the Lost Boy Pad 2 from Omnisphere. And again, it's just adding a little bit of texture. And layering all of these pads is doing a lot, is adding a lot of extra texture and depth and width, and it's just a lot more interesting than just having one pad from Serum or from Anna 2 or from Analog Lab. If you can have all of these different things that kind of move opposite of each other and they kind of swirl around the spectrum, you're typically going to get something that has a bit more interest to the listener. Then, one thing that I heard on almost every song on the album was some kind of ARP. I know that Jack Antonoff produced the album, and I know he uses a lot of kind of vintage synths, and a lot of them will have an ARP feature. So what I did is I just found this Modular Keys preset in Anna 2, and then I went in and I actually turned the ARP on myself, and I just programmed a nice little kind of simple ARP, and then I'm just holding down the same chords that we had earlier. Making it a little thinner, a little brighter, and then we have this kind of wide organ. Here's what it sounds like with nothing on it. This is just an Omnisphere patch. simple kind of mellotron, flute, or organ, but what we're doing is we're adding kickstart because I noticed that there's a lot of elements that have this kind of like either tremolo or kickstart or some kind of like gate, something that's adding a little bit of movement to sustained elements. And that added a click and a pop, so I'm just adding D-Click by RX8 from Isotope to just kind of get rid of that. And then one thing that you'll hear in a lot of Jack Antonoff productions is he uses these like really high strings. They're kind of a callback to 80s songs. And that's kind of a style and an aesthetic that he incorporates in a bunch of his things. We're using this element called Blue Strings. It's just from a Selena. It's kind of like the best of all time for these kind of like programmed string sounds. You'll hear it all over a bunch of Taylor Swift, a bunch of Lorde, a bunch of Carly Rae Jepsen. And it just adds these like really nice shimmery counter melodies up top. And what we're doing is we're adding some Juno chorus to really kind of take this into the 80s. This is going to spread it out, add a little bit of modulation. And then we're adding Black Hole by Eventide. Just a super good kind of washy reverb to put this in the background. And then we're doing some pretty drastic band passing on this because I don't want a ton of that brightness. It's more just for kind of texture. Now with all of this in here, let's kind of hear what we have. This will probably be the main that we add for the verse. I might pop in a couple little ear candy synths and do some filtering, but this should get us kind of the typical Taylor Swift Midnights verse. So now let's go in and let's start filtering this out because I want it to definitely be a little bit darker and moodier. And then what we'll do is we'll add some cool kind of call and response synths because that's a big thing that happened a lot in the album as well. If Jack Antonoff can fill kind of a free measure with some kind of synth, he probably is going to do it. So we'll do that in just 1 second. For the filtering, we're going to go pretty simple with this. I'm just using RC20 and we're just going to kind of automate this magnitude down as this kind of plays through the drums. And then we're just using the kind of typical Pro Q and we're just kind of opening up this bandpass as we go. So here's what it sounds like. And then I'm going to add in some kind of ear candy synths and show you kind of how those fell out to space. And then we're going to move on to the pre-chorus and chorus. I found some pretty cool patches. I found this one called Cheerfully Crushed. And then what I did is I printed it from Omnisphere. And the reason I'm printing it is because I wanted to chop it. I wanted to retime some of it. And then I'm going in and I'm manually transposing different elements. So it's kind of giving us this like weird glitchy bit crush thing. And that's going to give us just this cool kind of like extra texture. And we have that routed to the guitar group. That way it doesn't hit that filter. I kind of want us to have that brightness. Then we're using this filter, this kind of filler bass that is very, very inspired by, I believe it is Midnight Rain. It's kind of got this weird swelling bass. I made this patch from scratch. It'll be in there. I'll go ahead and call it Midnight Rain for the presets that you can download. But here's what it sounds like. And there's little things like that that are all over this album that kind of make really simple productions feel special. And then for the lead, this is just kind of based on a preset that we have called Your Eyes. I've just made it a little bit darker and I've added a bunch of kind of reverb and stuff like that to it. And we're going to call that good on the verse. I still want to put together a pre-chorus and a chorus, but we're running long on this, so I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera and then kind of fill you in. We're probably not going to add too much more other than just some layers. I'll fill you in on what I did for the pre-chorus. It's really simple. It's just that ARP that we had earlier. And I'm just opening that filter again on the synth bus. And then what I did is I found these loops that we're going to use in the chorus in 1 second. And I kind of just dragged it over here to give us a little bit of movement. And I just have this clap that I've cut very, very, very short and put some distortion and some reverb on. All right, so for the chorus, let's go over the drums first. We kind of changed to kick pattern, but we didn't do much to the actual mixing. We just had that stomp a little bit louder in there. And then what we've done is we went in and we added some things like we have this vinyl loop. and this stick loop, just to give us a little bit more movement without having to kind of go crazy on things like hats. We also have this clap in there layered over the snare, just to give us some extra punch and some extra depth. And then we have this real ride. Something that I heard him do in Maroon, and I really, really liked it. So here's all the drums together. And then for the second half of this chorus, I wanted to have a version where it kind of speeds up and does double time. So we've just moved the snare to the 2 and the 4, and then we've just made the hi-hat 16th notes instead of 8th notes, and we've just layered over a tambourine and a shaker. And that's literally all we did for the drums there. For the bass, we kept the exact same bass that we had for the verse, for that kind of halftime chorus. And then what we did is we have this kind of movement bass that's just out of Serum. It's the Sunset Reese, but what I did is I just added some movement with an LFO, just to give us a little bit of extra variation. And then what I did for the synths is I used pretty much everything we had, and then I just found this extra little ARP that added a little bit of brightness. It's the exact same ARP pattern. We're just using a different preset. We're using the pan flute. And then I found these like keys. They are a brass preset, but I've just made them a lot darker, just to kind of thicken that and fill it up. And then this is really, really important. This is something that I heard in a lot of the album as well. It's this one note that drones, and then you can see right here that we've got some automation where you can see that actually like pitch up. So what we've done is we've set the pitch bend in here to 2 semitones, 2 up and 2 down. And then what we're doing is we're playing this preset and it pitches it. Really cool element that you can use to kind of thicken up your synths. And then one thing that I really heard in a ton of the album was this like gated organ sound. So what it is it's literally just an organ out of Serum. And I'm running that through Guitar Rig just to give us like some crazy distortion. And that kind of gives it this really cool vibe, because a lot of organs back in the day used to be run through some kind of amp. So I'm just processing this with AC box and then some tape echo. And then I have the Transgate on here that's going to give us that like 16th note, really kind of staccato hit. So that's all for the first half of this chorus. And then for the second half, it's all the same synths. The only thing that we're adding is we have a post-chorus synth right here adding a lead. It's the same one that we used for the call and response in the verse. We've just made it a little bit brighter and turned it up a little bit. And then I have a steady keys right here that's kind of doing what the organ's doing, but it's only doing it in an 8th note. So it's a little bit more mellow. And it's just like this nice big, like stabby saw synth. So adding the movement from that, adding that really bright lead, adding the movement from that bass, and then just making those drums double time gives us this really cool transition from a nice big open halftime chorus to something like a really fun upbeat post-chorus. We're going to call that good on the instrumental. I'm going to track in some vocals, bring those in, and show you how we're going to process these vocals and arrange these vocals to kind of get that Taylor Swift sound. I've got some vocals tracked. For this album, she actually went way less bombastic than she did in like Reputation or 1989, but she did a lot more vocal production than like Folklore and Evermore. So what we're doing for the verse, just to go over some arrangement and what I actually tracked, we have a single vocal throughout the entire verse, and then for the second half of the verse, when it kind of picks up, we've got a vocal that I tracked that's the left and the right, but it's doing the exact same melody. It's just adding a little bit of thickness and width. And then for the chorus, we'll get there when we get there, but we've basically got a bunch of vocal stacks on these kind of like shouts, and then we're just filling that in with kind of like a triple tracked lead melody. Let's go ahead and just go through this verse. I did want to kind of model this off of the Maroon vocal where it's super roomy. It's got this like really short metallic reverb because we've mixed a kind of standard pop vocal on this channel a million times. So I didn't want to necessarily go over that, but here's what the vocal sounds like with no sends. Just your kind of typical, bright, still kind of warm pop vocal.
Cover me in tattoos. I can feel your words sinking. Put me like a full moon. I don't want to lose you. Hold me till the clock strikes 12.
Her vocal on this album is really warm in the low mids, but it's also super bright and almost sibilant in some spots. So I wanted to kind of leave that. And then for the sends, we're doing a parallel widening. We've covered this a million times. It's not really doing much on this, much less than normal. It's basically just a Dimension D to add a little bit of stereo spread. We are doing a quarter note delay that's just in repeater. However, for this one, I don't have this going ping pong or being spread. I actually have this quarter note delay mono, which is unusual for me, but I kind of liked it. And then for the slap delay, same thing. We're kind of like bringing this in. It's a bit more mono. We're only going like 20% right and left instead of being 100. I kind of want the vocal to be pretty centered in the middle besides this big reverb that we're about to talk about. And that's what I'm calling this Taylor Swift reverb. So we're using this very, very heavily. And what I like to do is before I use a reverb super heavily, especially a bright reverb, is de-ess it before it gets there. So I'm de-essing this insanely hard. And then we're going to be using the lustrous plates from, I believe it's just from Slate and Liquid Sonics. It's in their bundle. And I'm using this platinum plate. And I'm doing that because it's super bright and it kind of gives you a really quick splashy reverb that dissipates pretty quickly. And that's one thing that I heard in the album a lot. Then we're just making it a little bit brighter too with some reverb. Here's what it sounds like with all the vocals in solo, or just that vocal.
Cover me in tattoos. I can feel your words sinking. Put me like a full moon. I don't want to lose you. Hold me till the clock strikes 12.
And there's also this kind of washy reverb in there that you can use or you can kind of get rid of. It's just like a 3-second concert hall. It just kind of smooths out the vocals in the mix. You can kind of barely hear that one, but let's hear it with all of these turned off and on.
Cover me in tattoos. I can feel your words sinking. Put me like a full moon. I don't want to lose you. Hold me till the clock strikes 12. Hit me like a bad bruise. I don't want to leave your skin. Ocean waves to crush.
So using something like a short plate reverb or even a quick slap back delay is something that is used all over this album, especially on lead vocals. I noticed that her vocals tend to be more minimal in terms of tracking, but they tend to be more complex in terms of like adding space with things like those synths. So I did that for the lead vocal, and I pretty much did that on all of these side vocals too. What we're doing here is we kind of just have this nice flowy verse for the first half, and then I'm speeding it up a little bit.
Nights in and tuck it when it's only you and me.
I know I'm not Taylor Swift. A big thing to getting a Taylor Swift song is her actual voice, so bear with me. I know I sound nothing like her, and that's totally fine. But writing style, I feel like we're almost there.
And I crave these nights in and tuck it when it's only you and me. Now all the waters are slowly consuming me. I'm on a plane to the city tomorrow, praying to me.
And again, most of that texture is really just coming from that really short plate reverb, and that's doing a lot of that. Let's move on to the pre-chorus. I did this little tip on our Instagram this week, so if you want to see short little like 60-second tips, go follow our Instagram. It's just Make Pop Music, and we do kind of reels like this all the time. However, we should go over this vocal because it's going to be very, very requested. This was definitely not only inspired, but basically copied by the Midnight Rain vocal. So what you're doing on this is you're going to tune the vocals a little bit harder than you would. So I'm going to tune this to like a retune speed of 5, and that's going to give me this.
Just hold me tight. Enjoy the night.
I'll turn on all the other like standard vocal processing.
Just hold me tight.
But what gives this its big, big, big kind of tone, and the thing that you'll hear in the vocal for Midnight Rain is something like throat. So I'm using throat by Antares. You could also use the formant shift and auto-tune. I just find that when you're getting into this like super high falsetto kind of like crackly voice already, sometimes using formant shift can kind of give you all these artifacts that you don't want. And you can smooth a lot of that out in something like throat rather than just doing built-in formant shifting. So here are the settings that I have if you want to copy that. Feel free to play around in this plugin. It's a super cool plugin, and it comes in their bundle, and I feel like a lot of people sleep on it. But here's what it sounds like now.
Just hold me tight. Enjoy the night.
And then one thing that I noticed in that song too is it's got kind of a tremolo baked in, and that's just giving it a bit of movement, and it's almost like breaking it up, and it gives it this extra kind of digital feel that I really liked.
Just hold me tight. Enjoy
So I'm doing a 30-second note dotted delay, or not delay, but tremolo, and then depth at like 60%. And then what we're going to do is add a little bit of distortion and some bit crushing. And this is just to kind of, again, give it that extra kind of punch and that extra digital feel. Just hold me tight. And then we're just doing some reverbs, kind of basic band passing, scooping out some like muddy mids. And then that's literally it. It's pretty dry other than that. Just hold me tight. Keep kissing me until the moon turns more light. So that's what we're doing for that kind of main Midnight Rain inspired vocal effect. It's super simple. Tune the vocal hard, use something like a throat or a 4-minute control, and then just filter it out and add your distortion and tremolo to taste. Now let's get into the stacks for the chorus. This is something that I'm hearing in almost every Taylor Swift song since she's been doing pop instead of kind of like country, is she does a lot of these kind of shouts, and when she does them, she's layering them a ton. So let's go ahead and listen.
Stay, smother me in all of your haze. I have room for you in my place.
All right, so what I did is I didn't vocal line any of these. I noticed that her vocals in the album are a little bit looser. It kind of gives it that like indie pop, almost lo-fi feel. And for these big shouts on things like stay, say, way, haze, what I'm doing is I have the lead.
Stay.
And then I've stacked that left and right.
Stay.
And then I've stacked that left and right again.
Stay. Mother me.
And then I have the harmony left and right.
Stay. Mother me.
So it's just going stay. And then I have an octave down left and right.
Stay. Mother me in all of your haze. I have room for you in my place.
And then what we're doing is we're kind of doing a call and response where we have that big vocal stack. And then it's really dependent on kind of a lead vocal up the middle that has a ton of that really big metallic reverb in there. The chorus for Maroon is so roomy and so kind of washy and ambient. I kind of wanted to copy that, but I wanted something that fit the kind of tempo and vibe of this song. So that's what we're doing. The lead vocal is much louder than these stacks. It's 8 dB louder. So they're kind of just there for supplementation, and this lead vocal is carrying until we get to this phrase right here, which I'll go over in 1 second. And then one thing that Taylor Swift does really well is on responses that are at the end of a phrase, she'll have these really big, loud, super wide vocal stacks. So that's exactly what I wanted to do for this. I had stay be kind of super tuned, super loud, super roomy, and then I have the response to that being a little bit more mono, just kind of with that kind of big plate reverb. And then what we have to kind of close out each phrase is now these side vocals are only like 3 dB quieter. So instead of being 8 dB lower than the lead, they're only about 3 dB lower than the lead, which gives you this super wide, super kind of loose. It almost has a slapback delay in itself because we're not going in and kind of timing aligning everything. So let's hear the chorus now with all of that. Now, when we go into that double vocal, I'm literally just copying, pasting the pre-chorus vocal. And what I've done is I've just added a little bit of delay with Echo Cat, and then I'm using the ducking feature on this to kind of sidechain it to the vocal. And then I've just made this version a lot brighter and a lot louder. And that is literally everything that we did for this song. So it's a pretty simple arrangement. It's a lot of like pads and atmosphere and ambience and things like that. But before we go, I do want to play this from start to finish so you can kind of hear it. So if you want to hear how to make a Taylor Swift song like Midnights and what it turned out like, here you go.
Cover me in tattoos. I can feel your words sinking. Pull me like a full moon. I don't wanna lose you. Hold me till the clock strikes 12. Wear me like a bad bruise. I don't wanna leave your skin. Ocean waves are crashing, now the night is passing, and I crave these. Icing and tuck it when it's only you and me. Now all the waters are slowly consuming me. I'm on a plane to the city tomorrow, praying that maybe you'll follow. Now it's 11:11, you're in Colorado. Just hold me tight, enjoy the night. It's more than me and all of your haze. I have room for you in my place. Come back to New York City with me. I have too much left I wanna say. I don't wanna leave you this way. I think it's such a pity you'll leave. Just hold me tight. Enjoy the night. Kiss on me and tell me to move on. Just hold me tight. Enjoy the night. Kiss on me and tell me to move on.
And that's going to do it for this tutorial. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and hopefully whether you want to make music in this style or not, you've at least picked up some cool production techniques and things that you can use in any kind of genre, specifically pop. But I had a really, really good time making this. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com. You can check out all of our stuff over there, samples, presets, choruses. We have a podcast that you can listen to. If you want to download a lot of the sounds that you heard in this video, there is a free download to that in the description below, so go check that out. I do want to let you know, just a sneak peek, we do have an upcoming kind of start to finish production course that will be coming out the week of Black Friday. So if you're excited for that, if you like videos in this style where we flesh everything out, get ready for that. It's going to be like 13 hours of footage, 75 videos. That will be coming the 21st of November, so get ready. Other than that, if you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what videos you want to see in the comments down below, and we will be back next week with much more content. But until then, much love, peace.